Welcome, my dear ones. This is Tracy Anderson Askew, your host for the Transform Your Birth podcast, changing your mind about birth one story at a time. Each week, we'll be exploring a birth story through the lens of what birth can teach us. I'll be digging deep into each story so you can learn what it is that can change the way a birth unfolds. We can't control birth, but we can influence it. So listen in to find out how. Enjoy. Amy shares her story of two straightforward births, each one very different. She goes into detail of the things she does to manage each one, preferring to be still and not have people observe her. Her partner also plays an important role. She shares more deeply about her ability to feel confident to push back on suggested induction, sensing that her baby was still fine. A wonderful, inspiring story to remind us all that we have everything we need within us to deal with whatever unfolds. Please enjoy this interview. Welcome, everybody. Another episode of the Transform Your Birth podcast. And with me today, I have the lovely Amy. And I love having women who've had two or more babies, because every birth experience that we have sets up the next one. So it's actually quite important that you put a bit of energy into your first birth, because you don't always realize the impact that it can have on future births. And we learn a lot each time, and we often take those learnings and that wisdom into each birth. So I want to welcome Amy. Thank you for coming.
No problem.
Amy's got a little girl who's 6 and a boy who's 8. And Amy did calm birth with me back when I was teaching calm birth a long time ago now with her first birth. So Amy, can we go into your first birth? Can you remember, it was a while ago now, but can you remember how you were feeling about birth, and talk about what made you want to do a calm birth workshop?
So I was a little bit, I don't know, I'm pretty relaxed, easygoing person generally in life. And I was a bit the same with birth. So I hadn't actually thought too much about it. I only enrolled in the birth center because I had a friend who'd just been through it and was talking glowing of it. So, I hadn't extensively researched. I didn't feel super passionate about being intervention free. I just didn't really know all that much, but I'm pretty easygoing kind of. So I just kind of went, well, this is happening. We'll see what happens. You'll get through it and see what you can do to sort of bolster yourself along the way and educate. And yeah, it wasn't always smooth sailing. Like I wasn't sure even at various points that I actually was committed to a drug-free birth and stuff. Like I would sort of go to the birth center, and I remember when they showed us the placenta and just being like, oh my God, what am I doing? So yeah, it was up and down, but after I learnt more, I really kind of did commit into to knowing more and trying for a really sort of calm birth and all of that. So yeah, wasn't coming in with a whole lot of knowledge though.
Yeah, and that's why I'm so committed to this podcast, because knowledge is important. It's kind of good when you're a bit easygoing about birth, that you don't have too fixed an idea about what you want your birth to look like, because we can't control birth, but we can influence it. And preparation, I think, is really important on so many levels for so many reasons. So if you go back to when you worked with me, what were some of the big turning points that's helped you to see it differently, in terms of how you felt then about going forward to giving it a go without too much fuss?
Yeah, it was just with every piece of information, I just seemed to kind of go, yep, and just be reminded we've been doing this it's one of the most natural things we do. We put so much into life these days and want to control it all. And the whole experience of that was basically a lesson in that for me. The whole thing from due dates being overdue, from having a bit of gestational diabetes sort of come in, and like it was just a whole exercise in, do you know what, like you can't control this, but women have been doing this for as long as we've been around, so you've got this, you've just keep calm, just like that sort of self-talk the whole way along.
How did the course affect your partner?
Good. So my partner had two boys previously. But I think they'd both been cesarean. So he hadn't sort of done a natural sort of birthing before. Um, but yeah, he was always really good and calm too, just kind of always there. Not, yeah, I just helped him sort of come in with the plan, I think, of where we were going, hopefully,
Yeah.
with this one. But also very open to going, well, with birthing, whatever happens, happens, and we've
Yeah.
got to be ready to roll with that if, if the baby ends up breech or if this or
Yeah.
that or yeah.
Yeah. And that's a really powerful attitude to go in with, is to have an idea and a bit of a vision about how you want the birth to go, because the mind moves towards what you focus on, and harnessing the mind in birth is really important. So you do want to have a bit of an idea and a vision around how you'd like to be when you meet your baby, because that then starts to get your mind attuned to what to pay attention to and what the operating system is under these conditions called birth.
Mm.
And then there's a part of us that has to just go, well, and if I need this, I'll be okay. And if I need to have a cesarean, I'll be okay. And to be able to roll with it. So that's really powerful. What happened on the day of baby number one?
Yeah. Um, so I still remember it. It was a Thursday night. I was sitting on a fit ball doing exactly what you told. Sitting on a fit ball, bouncing up and down, watching just some terrible TV show at 9:30. And the waters broke. So we were
Ah,
like, okay, this is, so I'd had nothing else sort of really signal. And yeah, so the waters broke on the fit ball. It was really hard to give that fit ball away actually down the track when it had finished its time as a fit ball. But um,
is
so
that because you had an attachment to it?
yeah, I did.
My precious Fitball, my amniotic fluid flowed over
Yeah,
that ball.
yeah, yeah. So we just did what we knew to do at that time. We just kind of went, oh, okay, let's go to bed. Let's
Yeah,
hydrate. Let's just see if we can get some sort of sleep. Um, and then yeah, got a bit of sleep and then woke up kind of, I can't remember what time it was, but sometime in the morning with the contractions starting, pretty low level kind of thing. Yeah, and then we spent the whole day in that phase. And there was a few up and downs on that. I think I had a big giant vomit at one point, and
yeah,
well, I didn't know that was part of what can happen in birth. I don't know. I'd blocked that out somehow, or I didn't think I would. Maybe I don't know. Um, and yeah, just cruised along, just did different things through the day. Like felt like doing different things at different times, as you know. Like sometimes you feel like listening to really calm music. Sometimes you feel like listening to really angry music or something like, or just,
yeah,
more
yeah.
upbeat music. I was trying to stay active, but I really just wanted to lie down. Lying
Ah,
down helped me seem to tune into the contractions and just kind
yeah.
of see them through. So it was a
Tell
bit
me
of a
about that. Give me more details about when you were lying down, you were lying on your side
side.
and you were able to relax more in that position.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. I just got into such a nice zone, kind of where I was just lying down on my side. Like I'd sort of know when about it was coming, and then I'd just kind of be ready for when it would come. And I'd know the contraction would go for about so long, and then, yeah, get through it. Yeah, I just got into such a really nice flow. But it was, yeah, in my head, I was like, oh, but I'm supposed to be active. But all I wanted to do was that. uh,
Well, but it's interesting you say that, because when it comes to managing labour,
mm,
active birth is a really good strategy, because when we're upright and we're moving, we're supporting the downward descent of the baby, and it's the pressure of the baby on the cervix which releases the oxytocin. So more pressure, more oxytocin,
hmm
and more efficient labours. So active birth can often shorten labours. But, it's interesting, from when I used to work with women in labour, some women would not want to be active and all they wanted to do was be really, really still. And
Yeah.
other women could not be still. They were like a cat on a hot tin roof. And I always say in my classes, it's a combination of active and passive. But having said that, you've got to do what feels right for you to do. So if being active feels good, then you follow that. Mothers know what they should be doing, and they have this deep body intelligence, which
Yeah.
when they've got the freedom and the space, they organically respond to the labor in the way that supports the physiology of that labour because they're looking for comfort. That's why they know. And so it's interesting. You found you could get really in the zone and go very, very deep when you were still. And that potentially could have obviously supported your labour in a way that maybe being active wouldn't have.
Yeah, and it's really interesting though that you got to sort of trust yourself in that moment too, because I kept
Yeah,
kind of going, oh, I should be doing this,
should
but I
be.
was like, do you know what just feels good? This.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
it was quite funny for my second birth. So still was still a factor, but when I was in the birth center for my second birth, I kept ducking off to the bathroom so I could be still and no one could watch me. Like,
Ah, oh, isn't that interesting? Did you
like
feel guilty about like being still?
yeah, I think just being still. But then there's a few more people kind of paying attention to what I was doing and stuff for the second one. So yeah, I kept sneaking off into the bathroom and just being in there on my
Ah,
own for hours to the point they had to pull me out at one point. So,
yeah.
still was definitely my vibe.
Oh,
Just
I'm gonna also add something into what you've just said there. Sarah Buckley talks about this unobserved birth. Women don't like being looked at when they're in labour.
mm-mm.
And guess what? A lot of animals are the same. Breeders who breed $1 million racehorses, they are very careful about what that mare picks up when she's in labour. And if she's surrounded by a whole lot of people, that can absolutely interfere with her labour. And we are the same. So I don't think there's any mistakening the fact that intuitively you felt you didn't want to be watched. So you'd go and hide in the bathroom. I've seen other women do that.
That's good.
Very interesting. These are some of the little intuitive things women do, but it's interesting. You felt you should be active, and yet your whole body was saying, "No, be still," because that's when you could get right in that zone and not
Yeah.
create any resistance to the labour. So going back to your first labour, what happened then? You were at
Yeah.
home.
So we were at home, and so I had actually had the GB strep
Oh yeah,
positive result. Um, but my midwife had been working with me to probably avoid the antibiotics.
yeah.
So we were a bit nervous as we were starting to kind of pop past the 24 hours since the waters broke and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so my midwife came and visited me at home. I think she was like it was a little bit later in the night, maybe 8 or 9:30, something like that. Um, and I remember being really disappointed at that visit because, yeah, she came and checked things out and said, "Oh, yeah, you've got hours to go. Like, I'm going to see you in the morning," kind of thing. And I was like, "Are you serious?" Like, I feel like I've been going now for basically a whole day. Um, but yeah, so me and my husband always say, I think that maybe the moment she walked out the door, things just kicked in after that. We always say it must have just been after she walked out. But then again, because my contractions in both births actually never kind of got quite textbook. So they
Yeah.
never got quite textbook to
Interesting.
what they were looking for. So yeah,
When you
she was.
say that, what do you mean? What
I'm
they're
trying to
looking for?
remember what it was. I think it's just they weren't as frequent as they were looking for.
Right.
So they
Mm.
might have been, I think they were long enough, they just weren't quite as frequent. So she sort of looked at my timings that my hubby had been sort of doing, and she's like, "Yeah, you've got a fair way to go." And then I think I did think she did have a look, and I can't remember how many centimeters she said I was, but I clearly remember her saying, "Oh yeah, I think I'll be seeing you in the hospital in the morning."
Mm.
Like, okay, all right, we'll just keep going then, shall we?
And so there's often an assumption that, particularly for first time mothers, that it's going to take a long time, but that's not true for all first time mothers. And the other thing that can happen too is, we often watch contractions, and when they're about 3 minutes apart, 1 minute long consistently, we start to see that as being an established labour. But I've also worked with women whose contractions haven't gotten closer than 5 minutes or even 10 minutes apart and been pushing at home. So it is not an exact science. And when it comes to making the decision to go into hospital,
Mm,
I often tell women, go when you don't think you can do the car trip. I used to observe this in women. They'd be in labour at home and I'd be there as their doula. And
hmm
then all of a sudden you'd hear this, oh God, I don't think I can go anywhere. And you go, oh, there it is. So what happened to you in that?
Yeah, so we sort of took the advice and went, okay, we've still got a fair way to go. And yeah, it
Mm.
was what you said. It was just not fast enough. Not so they were long, but yeah, I think they were probably more out at the 5 minutes, 10 minute. So the things just really kicked off after that. In hindsight, I can see I was pushing and I didn't even know it. Like I was just feeling a weird kind of pressure down there and was dealing with that pressure. Um, so yeah, we ended up, I think we went for about 2 more hours on that. And then my husband said, that's it, we're going. Like, and called the midwife and said, I think things are, he described a few more things that were happening. And we went, yeah, I was lying down across the back seat of our Mazda 3. Like I was beyond
Mazda 3, that's not a big car.
not a big car. No, I think we made some token effort with the seatbelts on me. But
Oh no.
I remember, and it was in January, so it was the first week of January. I remember I was wearing this like crop top and pregnancy shorts, just like flung across the back seat. Tony's
Letting
like,
it
oh,
all hang loose.
oh, all loose. Yeah, that's right. My husband was like, I just don't want to run into a police officer right now. Um, but yeah, he took a photo of us before we got into the car, and I still look at that photo too. Like I look like I'm on drugs. Like I'm so in a zone. Like you can just sort of see I'm in a zone. Um, and then yeah, so then we get to the Canberra hospital, just jump out of the car, have to get up to the birth center in level 3. So I remember shuffling up, trying to have a contraction in the lift, and like oh,
Wow.
taking us the whole way there. And then we get to the birth center. My midwife's there. It's not my regular midwife because, of course, she'd had the weekend off when it had fallen. And she was like, okay, we'll just head down to the suite. And then she's like, actually, I might just, can I just have a look for a second? And so we had a little bit of an inspection in the waiting room of the birth center. And she's like, oh, yes, I can see a head. Yeah, we'll be.
You had a head on view.
I had a head on view. Yeah.
Wow.
She's like, yep, we'll be going into this room and I think we'll probably have one push and you'll have a baby. And I was like, okay.
Wow.
And then we did that. And then yeah, so it was you know, yeah, it was a lot to take in, but very fast in the end.
Mm, mm. And what was it like when you met your little boy?
Yeah, so yeah, because of the whole flurry of it, like I remember, you know what it's like, you could probably imagine what that was like. Like I just walked into a room, um I think they kind of just had some pillows set up kind of just the side, and then bam, it all happened. And there was fluids, there was all sorts of things happening. And then I remember we did lie down, sort of hop on the bed, and the cord was still attached and stuff. I remember his little face crawling up towards my breast, kind of like ferreting around for food. And
Wow.
it's the most perfect moment I've probably ever had. Like just this, yeah, just blown away by just how natural that was. Like I remember him, yeah, just kind of, and of course I had no experience of that. I didn't, yeah, it was, yeah, just beyond kind of just really natural. And yeah, coming up and trying to nuzzle around and trying to gum around up there.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so,
that's babies when they're born. They're wired with reflexes that get them to go looking for the breast. And
yeah,
most babies when they're born are very hungry. And so they sort of snort and sniff around
yeah,
and they're
yeah,
looking for the change in color and they sort of head for the nipple because they can see that there's a change and they can do that. Babies that haven't got drugs in them are very alert and very ready for that next phase. It's very special to watch and usually takes about an hour. What did it take your son to do?
very quick, I feel
He
like.
was
I mean,
on.
he was on. Like, I mean, there must have been a little bit of hoo-ha around the kind of very quick though. And I didn't know
Wow.
that. And yeah, it's really funny you say that sort of that snuffly noise and stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was all there.
Yeah. It's all there. Absolutely.
And
So
I had no
after,
idea that was going to happen. Yeah.
what do you think? What do you think made the biggest difference with you being able to manage that birth?
Yeah, I don't know. A, a good a good support with my partner.
Yeah.
Definitely. He was there the whole way, kind of just doing what he needed to do in the background, just quietly, just would offer a little tens machine when, do you want to try this? Do you want to, like just keeping my fluids up. Like he was just quite good in the way he was there,
Mm-hmm.
but not there.
Yeah.
Uh, just continuing to roll with it a bit. Like it was a bit, when I think about it now, it was a bit scary when we were at home when it was getting that close. Like,
Mm.
because yeah, I was pushing and I just didn't know it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just keeping calm, I suppose, and just rolling with the punches as they come. Um,
What are you doing with your mind? Were you doing anything with your mind during contractions?
Very much just different things at different times, but yeah,
Mm.
sometimes just kind of repeating things over and over again, like just to kind of
Like what?
just, I can't even remember what they were. They were just like little, I think they were just different things at different times, like almost like probably like kind of motivational. But
Mm.
I just remember, yeah, repeating things over and over again, that just to get through it, and almost like just knowing, once you know it's coming to an end, you kind of like, okay, all right. It's got another couple of minutes and okay, then we're going to be back into it again. Yeah, all right. Okay. But just kind of accepting that it was happening. And I think I kind of also, I don't know, like it did change at the end. And, you know, I was at one point asking for, oh, I want some drugs. But I think my brain was also doing a bit of, you know what, this is not too bad. Like,
Mm.
it's
Mm.
right what they say. This is not too bad. I can do this. I
Yeah.
was made for this.
Mm.
Yep. Yep.
Nice.
I
Good
think
belief
there's a
system.
lot of that bolstering kind of going, yep,
Mm.
I feel part of something bigger. I feel part of, you know, things women have been doing for
Yeah.
forever. And now I'm, yeah, joining their
Good
club kind of thing.
reminder. We need to be reminded of that as women, that, we're born for this. Our bodies were made to do this. And women have been doing this since the beginning of time, long before those drugs were ever invented. And
Yeah.
yes, there's a place for the drugs. And I talk about that in other podcasts, but most of the time we don't need them. And I think it's really important women start to open their minds to the fact that, yes, you've got them, but don't assume that you're going to need them.
And
Mm.
yeah, I was
It's,
flooded with something,
yeah,
like whatever the good vibes were, like whatever the
yeah.
good natural ones were, I was flooded with them.
Endorphins.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've got our own drugs,
Yeah.
endorphins. We've got relaxin going around, which helps to soften our body and help us to expand and open. We've got prolactin, which is a very bonding hormone, calming hormone that supports us to get ready to feed our baby, but it has a very calming effect on the nervous system. And of
Mhm.
course, the biggest one, oxytocin, which is that orgasmic hormone, like it's the hormone
Mm.
of orgasm. It's a feel good hormone. It's a very loving hormone. So, yeah, there's a lot of hormones that we've got going on that support not only for us to be able to manage the intensity of those sensations, but to feel good about it. And, that's what helps then set us up for that next phase, which is the feeding and the sleeping. And often women are high as kites for days, even
Yeah.
weeks. It
Well,
can
that was,
really float on that stuff. If you
yeah.
could bottle it,
Oh,
you
I
wouldn't
was.
need, yeah, you wouldn't need ice or heroin or any of that shit. You'd just use the body's own hormones.
100%. That's
Mm,
why I'm a bit of a raver about it to other pregnant women I met.
yeah,
It's like, if you can pull this one off, like I never felt better, I don't think, for the couple
yeah.
of days after. And I was quite lucky. I didn't sort of incur any injuries um in it or anything. So,
Mm,
I was like, wow, if I could bottle whatever was going on there, amazing. But yeah,
yeah,
just reinforce that idea of kind of going, yeah, was
yeah.
made to do it kind of thing. Like,
So with baby number two, you didn't feel the need to prepare for baby number two because you had that confidence and that knowledge from your first birth.
yep.
So how were you feeling as you got ready to give birth to number two?
Um, Probably a mix of, still a little bit like, oh gosh, knowing anything can happen, and there's
Yeah,
a little bit of that mixed feelings because it had such a,
yeah.
even though it was a little bit dramatic with George, um, it overall was pretty amazing
Mm,
outcome kind of thing. So kind of having mixed expectations of going, oh, geez, I hope it goes a bit like that again, but then trying
Mm,
to again be open that maybe it wouldn't and maybe it would be
yeah.
different. Um,
I think that's an important point. Birth is a humbling experience. I don't care how many babies you've had, you never feel cocky. When I
mm-mm.
was having my fourth, with all of the experience that I had and the knowledge and everything, I did not feel cocky giving birth to my fourth baby. I knew I was walking into the mystery. And I think that's something worth acknowledging, because it is one of those things we can't control. And, when you're going for number two and you've had a really beautiful experience with number one, there's a feeling of, well, is it going to be the same?
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
you're
So
walking
there,
into that mystery again. Mm,
yeah, so there was a quiet confidence, kind of a quiet confidence of going, you've done this once, you can
yeah,
make it. Um, you've now, you've got there was nearly 2 years to the day, so you've now had a 2-year-old toddler going around, so you've dealt with a lot of stuff in that 2 years too. You're ready to welcome number two. I did know Zoe was going to be a girl, which I was really excited about because the three other siblings are boys, so
right.
we knew we were having a little girl. So I was excited to meet my daughter. I was also equally happy to have had 4 boys. That would have been fun too. Um, so yeah, quietly confident, kind of open-minded, hoping that it would play out reasonably similar. Um, but also learning a couple of things along the way. As it turns out, some of them were useful, some of them were not. But
Yeah,
I think that's probably the same for you. Probably bits of your 4 were this and that. So
yeah.
yeah, but just trying to be confident again, and just trying to channel that stuff as well. Going, well, yeah, you did it one time. What's to say you couldn't do it a second time? Mm.
So what happened on number two? Let's talk about Zoe's birth.
Yeah. So she was a little bit different in that she was into so that the I only I was like 5 days overdue with George first time around. So I'd had to do a little bit of ducking and weaving with the hospital on induction, because I'd had a little bit of problems with my fasting the diabetes, reading the fasting one.
Yeah.
So I hadn't ever gone insulin dependent or anything like that, but they were sort of interested once I hit my due date about how long they were going to let me go. For Zoe, she was already out over 7, 8 days, so I was 41 and 2, I think. So Zoe had been giving me Braxton Hicks kind of all through the night times, like for about a week. So I kept having all these false alarms. Like I'd be like, it's time to go. We're on. We're into labor mode. Where's all my things, kind of thing. And then it just wouldn't. It wouldn't come on. I'd just be awake in the middle of the night, going, oh no, 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 that was just some sort of false alarm. So that was happening nearly every night, which was a different experience because I had just waters broken first time up and we were in. Um, but yeah, I think it was on. Yeah, just one night. I think I'd had an induction booked for about 2 days time, I think. So I did have in my mind, like, come on, Zoe, you got to come. I don't want this thing to happen. So come on. Um, and then yeah, did just wake up from my sleep at one point and went, and again, oh, okay, I think these are contractions. Yeah. And then we just sort of watched it, saw how it went. And then yeah, we're like, okay, this is the thing. Um, kind of put in some of the same steps again. So, just did all the things that worked last time, had a shower, just kind of got into the vibe. But this time we were a little bit more, no, we're not going to leave it that late to go to the hospital.
A little bit nervous about second stage, were you?
A little bit, yes, a little bit nervous about second stage and a little bit nervous about the fact that we might not be looking at the just the speed of the contractions as our trigger
Yeah.
to be heading down to Woden. um, so in the end, I think I kind of was in labor for most of the day. We ended up hitting the hospital at about midnight, so it was about middle of the night, and had what happens to I think a couple of people kind of got there and then did woo back a little bit. I'd been absolutely gutted first time around that I hadn't got to use the water birth, like that.
Get in the bath. Yeah.
That had been what I'd like because I was at the hospital for 5 minutes flat with George. So we got down there nice and early. The bath was drawn and everything like that. And then, yeah, the midwife did have to tell me. She's like, Amy, I don't think you can go in. You're just not like, you're not. I'm worried you'll slow down even more.
Yeah.
So, disappointed about that. Um, but that's where I, yeah, started just doing my bits where I would just duck off into the duck off into the bathroom for a little while and then just not emerge. And a
What were
couple
you
of times,
doing in the bathroom? Sitting
just
on the
kind of
toilet?
just sitting on the toilet. Yeah, just kind of I remember leaning over sort of on the rails,
Yeah. So
the
your
rails.
partner wasn't in there with you, just you on
No,
your own?
just
Yeah.
me. Yeah,
Wow.
just me. Um, Leaning over, doing my breathing, just kind of getting through the contractions as they'd come, and yeah, it was but in and out. I think I remember my midwife had been on the weekend off and she was coming on to work at 8 a.m. And it's really funny. I had Zoe at 9 a.m.
Oh,
And so I
you wanted that midwife.
I think I did. I think I did. The moment she should have sort of turned up, it was kind of all on. Like,
Came on. Wow.
yeah, so we sort of, yeah, mucked around a little bit, sort of mostly through the morning, tried to snooze, tried to rest, did my thing where I'd, yeah, duck off for a little bit, you know, say I was going for a shower and then just go and breathe through my contractions in there. But I feel very reassured that you say that it's normal to
Yeah.
not want to be unobserved. Like
Yeah.
to hmm. Um so things were progressing. In the end, they did have to pull me out of the bathroom because they're like, we need to find out what's going on. Like we need to inspect. Um and then when they did get me out on the bed, I didn't want to open my legs. Like just for the pressure, it just felt so much nicer to
Yeah.
kind of keep them together. So I wasn't, obviously I wasn't really all that easy to negotiate with at that point. But yeah, again, just in a real zone, just in my own zone, kind of knowing what had to get through with each contraction that was coming, and yeah. But I do remember them being like, Amy, we can't see, like. You need to let us inspect a little bit more to see where you're at with dilation. But then yeah, my midwife arrived. It seemed to be all on in around about between 8 and 9 a.m., which is a really weird time to be going into labor at the hospital because it was sort of coming alive for the week.
Yeah.
Like I could hear people starting work. I could hear like just the firing up of a hospital on Monday morning kind of while I'm in this room, meeting my daughter. It was a very weird moment. But so yeah, I don't remember. I wasn't allowed in the bath. They still didn't change that. Um I was tempted to have some gas, but I didn't have that. Um, I think I did do a demand at some point of that's it, I've had enough. But, we were well too late and I wouldn't have done it anyway. But my midwife had told me, she's like, yeah, most people do demand it at some point. I was like, oh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
They don't mean it or it's too late, but they will
So were
ask.
you able to get in the bath
No,
eventually? Not at all.
no, no, they
She
didn't.
came really quickly again.
She came quick again. Yeah. Yep.
So what position were you in?
Uh, on the bed, sort
Yeah.
of, yeah, leaning over pillows, kind of like on all fours, sort of thing. Yeah, which I didn't want to do, but it worked. And then, yeah, she came out. She was a little bit more mucky than George when she came out. So like it was a bit of a
Yeah.
different experience. And yeah, then I did with my third stage for Zoe, we just let that happen naturally. So I think with George, we might have done the sort of accelerant, but we just let that happen naturally. So I think just with whatever was going on, and that was pretty cool to happen too. Um, when I saw it come out, I don't think the placenta was in such great shape for being nearly 42 weeks along. Like it was not in great shape, but yeah, got to meet Zoe. I don't remember her sort of crawling up and nuzzling for the breast, but it was pretty amazing to meet her as well once
Yeah.
we. But
Wow.
yeah, about a full on hour at the end there. Mm.
Mm. Beautiful. Oh, that's so lovely. Um, what did you learn about yourself going through those two experiences?
Yeah. Just just a quiet, yeah, confidence, toughness, just kind of, um, I'd always sort of known that I could put up with a fair bit, but to sort of kind of gone and done that, I felt like I'd sort of joined a fairly esteemed club of women who've, you know, birthed over the years. I think, yeah, just sort of confirmed some of the things about how I approach life just normally, kind of being fairly easygoing, and that seemed to be quite an asset for this really natural process. I always tell when I've got friends that are pregnant and everything now, I always just try and um, exude a bit of that, because I see everyone get so anxious and tense
Mm,
um, and entirely right sometimes and entirely explainable, but I do
yeah.
just sort of go, oh, do you know what? Sometimes it just works if you sometimes just lean into it and I relax. But then obviously I know there's a lot of things that happen. So I
Yeah.
also feel really lucky that mine played out the way they did.
There was no complexity. And when birth, you know, when women go into labour feeling calm, feeling confident, they're learning to work with their birth, not against it. And
Hmm.
there's no complexity. Birth can be just very straightforward and, have its own rhythm, its own flavour, its own sort of pathway. But what, unfortunately, in our culture, our heads are so full of all the things that can go wrong and all of the complexity. And women get left with a feeling of, oh gosh, I wouldn't know what to do in that situation. How would I manage that situation? And because of that, that sits inside of her psyche as a fear, which creates an inner tension in her body.
Yeah.
And so then when she goes into labor, those fears can play out in the labor. If you've ever wondered why our intervention rates are increasing, there's, I think, a lot of different reasons why that's happening, which is that need to interfere, whether it's a real need or not, is always up for negotiation or up for debate. However, I think part of the complexity that seems to be very prevalent is part of it, not necessarily all of it, but part of it is the fact that women have got their heads full of lots of different stories. And so women need to hear stories like yours, Amy, because um, we are not taught to trust and believe in the natural process of birth and the way that it can unfold. So, Amy has had she shared with us today two amazing stories. And they're stories of a woman doing the prep, getting a partner on board, learning some tools, and then just really working with her labour intuitively. In Amy's case, she was more still. She wanted to lie. She wanted to go into the zone. But she did lots of different things to help her to find comfort. She also discovered that she didn't like being observed. She did much better when people weren't looking at her. And that's an interesting thing to consider when it comes to being, surrounded by the people you trust. And ultimately, her labours and births unfolded in a very straightforward manner. Is there anything else you'd like to say, Amy, before we clock off today?
No, just probably, yeah, reinforcing what you were saying. There were a few moments in it where it feels really weird to be not contesting medical advice, but nearly contesting medical advice. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so, I've often thought, like, if I'd just listened to people and went, okay, fine, I'm now overdue. This is getting high risk. I need to induce. Like, my whole story would be different.
Oh, yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah,
Mm,
it would be so. And I had a lot of people kind of starting to try and ring those bells, like you were saying, fill your head with sort of
yeah.
the what ifs and the anxiety. Oh, and you might because you've had a little bit of a dance with gestation. Maybe it's enormous, and maybe like maybe,
Mm.
I mean, my babies were both 4 kilos, so they weren't small, but
Oh, what's small, what's big? Who
yeah,
knows?
that's right. Well,
Depends
they were
on the
very
person birthing, doesn't it? It has nothing to do with the size of the baby and everything to do with the size of the person birthing.
well. That's right. I got them both
Yeah,
out unscathed. So,
yeah,
um,
yeah.
but yeah, like I often do reflect on that and go, oh, actually, if I hadn't have sort of trusted, sort of, and would we talk it through? I had a great birth center midwife who was really supportive to talk
Yeah.
things through, really laid out the proposition and the risk, and then I evaluated it and things like
Mm,
that. Um, and just considered those other exit points of going, well, if this happens, you can do that, and going, oh yeah, that's true. Yep, stay on plan A then. Boom, let's go. Um, but yeah, it is a bit of a challenging situation where you're sitting there going, well, I'm just little old me, and I don't know much about birthing, and yeah, there's all these risks and interventions and things like that. And yeah, you're right, it does sort of fill your head a little bit. So,
Mm.
um, but yeah, I do reflect on that often and go, wow, my story could be so much different
And it
if
would
I,
have been very, very different to be induced. It puts you on a completely different trajectory.
yeah,
And look, yeah, you're little old you, but you're the person you're the body and the vessel through which this baby's being born. And there's an intelligence to you. And I'm talking about this more and more in my podcasts, in my sessions with my families, that there's an intelligence to the system that we don't always tap into and listen to. And, when we start to work with that intelligence of the mother and listen to her and what she senses about the potential dangers, and then look at the assessment of risk, because really, when they say, oh, you've got gestational diabetes, we are going to need to induce you,
mm,
that is a risk assessment. That's not a diagnosis. It's not an accurate portrayal of what's really going on for the safety of this baby and this pregnancy. It is a risk assessment based on data,
yeah,
trends. There's a higher risk of X, Y, Z, whatever the statement is. And that's based on research from other women in other places, not
yeah.
about this pregnancy. And we always need to look at this
This
pregnancy
pregnancy,
and
yeah,
look at the trends and manage risk by there's more than one way to manage risk than just induction.
absolutely. And I felt that, and yeah, I did always feel quietly. I did feel like things were okay. I did feel like
Yeah.
all some of the markers that might be there if we did have a problem weren't there. So why would I
Mm.
just take this blunt edged like, oh yeah, you got
Mm.
to do it? But that did take some, yeah, probably
Pushing back.
yeah, did take some pushing back, but I probably hadn't thought of it as a kind of innate motherly intelligence, but I did sort of take it as a being a bit of
Mm.
I didn't just jump to the first piece of thing I got and went, oh, okay, that's it. Like I did sort of
Yeah.
question things and did consider my own circumstances. But
Yeah.
yeah, I hadn't ever thought of it that maybe it was something a bit more going on there, bit of
I,
deep
I would
maternal
say
intelligence.
yes, I would say 100% that's the case. You talk to particularly independent midwives who really get to know the mother and
Yep.
develop this incredible sense of who this woman is, and then has the wisdom to actually ask questions of the mother and get the mother to tune in. I had a beautiful independent midwife I used to know who she made a comment to me one day, the women always know. They don't know that they know, but when you ask them, they know. I thought, interesting.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
So
And
she was
mm,
very big at asking the mother questions.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think I had a pretty in tune midwife too. Like we worked together. She wasn't there for either births, but we worked together both in both pregnancies. And I think she did catch my measure a bit too. I think she
Yeah.
did sort of
Yeah.
catch the sort of person I was. And
Yeah. And I think they would have an instinct about this. It still looks like a normal pregnancy. Why would we interfere with that?
yeah,
When it comes to making decisions around inductions, it's always important also to ask, what are the risks of induction? Because there are risks with induction, and they could
yeah,
be more, the risk benefit analysis could be more in favor of not inducing. So you need to look at both sides of the coin when it comes to making those decisions. Our current induction rates for first time mothers are just shy of 50%.
wow,
Yes. And
whoa,
according to Hannah Darlin, I was listening to her talk about this recently. It's not leading to better outcomes for the mothers and the babies. In fact, what it is leading to is more and more babies needing to have a stint in NICU, the neonatal intensive care unit. So they need help when they're born, because if you induce at 38 weeks, that could be 4 weeks early for a baby.
mm,
It has implications too. So these are part of the trickiness of making good decisions, safe, appropriate decisions, needs to be based on a much bigger profile of the pregnancy rather than hospital policy and, oh, you've got gestational diabetes, so we're going to induce you at X.
yeah. It
You know,
just didn't feel
yeah.
right. It didn't, and
So,
and it didn't feel right also to be again, I'd learnt enough to know that like
Mm.
the bub's going to come when they want to come, and everything about this induction makes me think like, well, you're just going to rudely interrupt their stay, and
Mm.
they're going to get an eviction notice, and
Yeah.
I don't think
An
it just
eviction notice.
it didn't quite
It
match for
didn't
me. I was
equate.
like,
It didn't feel right for you, and you were
no,
tuning in, and that's an important thing to do. But sometimes inductions are appropriate. So this is not about making any judgments for or against inductions. It's about trying to take a pregnancy and look at the whole picture, not
yeah.
just a policy of management based on some trend and
Yeah.
analysis
Oh,
of
and
what.
100%. I did have an induction book. Like I wasn't going to go over 42 weeks. Like
Yeah,
that, I wasn't going to. So,
yeah.
that would have probably been clinically indicated at that point to just,
Yeah.
just,
Although I tell you, I knew a woman who had 4 babies,
mm.
all of them at 44 weeks.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
again,
she was just so pig headed, is probably the best way to describe her, about the fact that it takes 44 weeks to grow our babies. It was in
yeah.
her family. She
Oh,
was
okay.
confident. She pushed back. She was absolutely would not budge on it. And big family, by the way, just I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but she was 6'2" and all of her kids were huge.
Yeah. All right. Well, I was overdue, and so were both my siblings and stuff too. So I sort of had a bit of confidence. Like I was comfortable
Yeah.
with that as well. I didn't think
Well,
I
that's
didn't.
it. I mean, what we know is that 95% of babies are born between 37 and 42 weeks. So that's the zone.
Mm,
And I imagine there are some babies that take even longer than that, and some babies potentially less than that. But
mm.
this is the mystery of nature, and we do our best to manage risk, and I think that's a wise thing to do. We don't want to lose babies, but
No, absolutely.
it's always important to recognise that we can't put nature in a box. Mm.
Definitely not. Even though I think we want to, particularly this day and
Yeah,
age, we definitely
exactly.
can't. I
Yeah.
also say that. I say anyone that's just let it go. Just let go. Any idea you can control any of this, just
And has that extended into your parenting, Amy?
a little bit probably.
100%. You're not in control of these kids. You can influence them. You can love them. You can put a roof over their head. You can feed them, protect
Yeah.
them, but you can't make them conform into some perceived ideal that you'd like them to be. Boy, my boys push back against that little tendency that I had at the beginning of my world. Now, I just shake my head and just go, okay.
The moment
You
you've
are who
dealt
you are.
with a newborn through the night too, you're kind of like, oh
Yeah,
yeah, no, we're just doing what
exactly.
you're going to do. Yeah. And then it
Exactly.
just continues on.
Oh, thank you so much, Amy, for sharing your beautiful, inspiring stories. It's good for women to hear birth in a straightforward, uncomplex way, and to also appreciate some of the nuances around, how you managed it, your behaviours, how you responded to your labour, as well as recognising the importance of how women birth and how that can set us up for that next stage of parenting. So thank you all for listening again this week, and we'll have another wonderful episode next week. So please stay with us. And if you feel compelled, please review and give us a good review to let other people know about the wonderful work we're doing here at Transform Parenting. Thanks for listening. Bye for now. This episode has been brought to you by Transform Parenting, an organisation that provides courses, coaching and community from pregnancy through to the first 7 years of a child's life. It is a place where you can learn, get support and grow into your role as a parent. Our Transform Your Birth course, both in Canberra and online, is waiting for you to feel calmer and more confident to give birth and change the way you labour. Or why not watch our free masterclass on Keeping Relaxed and Excited About Birth, where we discuss the 3 most important things that can change a birth. You'll find us at our website on www.transformparenting.com.au.